93.5, 1590 WAKR. Let's go to film school. Film study professor Joe Fortunato on board with us this morning. He joins us each and every Friday at this time as we go to school on films, and certainly with the anniversary and also with a new release. Joe said, Ray, we have to do Jurassic Park as we turn the clock back to the early 1990s for the original Jurassic Park. And Joe, without further ado, take it from there, my friend.
Well, good morning, Ray, and you're absolutely right. This week is the release of Jurassic World Dominion. So we're going back to the original from 1993. In fact, this movie opened on June 11th, 1993. It broke box office records its first weekend with $47 million. Again, by today's standards, doesn't sound a lot, but it was a record at the time. It went on to gross $402 million in the U.S., which made it the highest-grossing film of all time at the time, and almost $1 billion worldwide. In fact, Steven Spielberg actually made $250 million by himself from this movie, which was the largest sum any individual had ever made for a movie.
Wow. So when we look at the movie, developed from a book, and the right cast had to be put together, and they had to pick a location for this. So go down those three roads for me, Joe.
Well, they ended up doing it in Hawaii. In fact, there was a hurricane that interrupted the set of Jurassic Park during its production, which was pretty dangerous. The film itself generated so much interest in dinosaurs. I mean, dinosaurs are always popular with kids and stuff, but the best-selling book and the movie itself generated so much interest that the study of paleontology had a record increase in students. The movie also revolutionized the way dinosaurs were portrayed, and we'll get to that in a minute with the special effects. But in previous movies they were all slow moving and methodical, and now in this movie they were fast and athletic. Some of the casting that might have been Sean Connery, the original James Bond, was actually offered the role of John Hammond and turned it down. The owner of Jurassic Park. A couple of people that tested for the role of Ellie Sattler were Sandra Bullock, Gwyneth Paltrow, Julianne Moore, Helen Hunt, and Terry Hatcher. So they all were in the mix for that role. Jim Carrey was considered for the role of Dr. Ian Malcolm, that ended up going to Jeff Goldblum. And Kurt Russell actually turned down the role of Alan Grant because of his salary demands. So there's some of what might have been with the casting. In terms of special effects, the dinosaurs only have about 15 minutes of screen time in this film, which is kind of like Jaws, where it only has a certain amount of screen time with the shark. About 9 minutes of screen time was devoted to Stan Winston's animatronic dinosaur. Stan Winston he's passed away since, but he was a legendary special effects guru. And about 6 minutes went to the CGI dinosaurs done by Industrial Light and Magic, which was owned by George Lucas. Now, the legend has it that George Lucas saw the test footage of the computer-animated T-Rex, and he actually shed tears of joy thinking how far they had come with special effects, so much so that he decided the technology was good enough to begin work on the Star Wars prequels a few years later.
And, of course, in the current movies, the older cast, when you talk about Sam Neill, Laura Dern, that old cast, and Jeff Goldblum coming together with the latest movie. But, Goldblum, Neill, and Dern, they've come together throughout most of the movies. There's been a couple we haven't seen them, but we've seen them in a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, they have returned in previous movies. Some of them have. But this is... I'm sure there's going to end up being more Jurassic Park movies in some way, but supposedly this is sort of the last go-round with the new cast, so they're kind of rounding up the old gang and putting everybody together for one last big bang, as it were.
Joe Fortunato is with us in film school. Joe, I guess talk about the development and the idea of Jurassic Park, because we're talking about this crew. I mean, they did Jaws, and they wanted to do something on land, same type of movie, and they came up with a big winner. But talk about the idea of doing this movie and how these great minds came together.
Well, Michael Crichton wrote the book of Jurassic Park. He actually came up with the idea many years before. What's kind of interesting, actually, is that Steven Spielberg was in the early stages of pre-production on the movie ER, based on Michael Crichton's novel ER. When he heard about Jurassic Park, and he said, "No, we're not doing that. We're dumping that, and we're going to make this dinosaur movie instead." Of course, ER ended up being a very popular and very successful TV show, and that was executive produced by Steven Spielberg. During the production, I should say, or even post-production, more accurately, of Jurassic Park, Spielberg was working on Schindler's List in Poland. He was shooting the movie, which, as you can imagine, was a very difficult and emotional type of film to do. And so he had to sort of switch gears mentally and emotionally at night to do the post-production on Jurassic Park. He's called this the most difficult period of his film career.
Wow, interesting. What else you want to add to us, Joe?
Well, I actually personally, back in my Hollywood days, went to visit the set. More accurately, I snuck onto the set of Jurassic Park. It was empty at the time, but we actually saw if people remember the movie, the tree that they were sitting in when the Brachiosaurus sneezes on them, and there was a Brachiosaurus head sticking on a stick that was used to indicate where the real animatronic dinosaur was going to be. So I have a fond memory of that moment.
That's awesome. Joe, how long, you mentioned it was on a Hawaiian island. How long did it take for the filming of the movie? And I asked that because you mentioned a hurricane on one of the other islands and a delay, but talk about the weather's role in filming of the movie.
Well, the hurricane delayed the production. They nevertheless managed to capture the shots from the hurricane and actually use them in the movie. So it kind of worked out to their advantage that way, although it was still a very dangerous situation. The pre-production on this film was 25 months, which is quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And of course, the post-production with the special effects and the dinosaurs took a long while as well.
Usually with blockbuster movies, you get some sort of music and the music score, and a lot of times Academy Award nominations. Did we have that with this movie or not?
Well, I've mentioned a number of movies in the past week, ironically, where John Williams did win an Oscar for his score. He did not win for this one. The film did win 3 Oscars, but they were all for technical stuff, sound effects, visual effects, that sort of thing. But, John Williams' score for this movie and his theme for Jurassic Park is still pretty legendary, and I think one of his standard films. The interesting thing about music is at the very end, when it says a Steven Spielberg film on the credits at the end of the movie, if you listen closely, you'll actually hear a slightly modified 5 tones from the Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I love it. Joe, let me ask you this, and we're talking with Joe Fortunato, film study professor. When you look at like Star Wars that have had the legacy of, almost 50 years, but now when you look at Jurassic Park, almost 30 years, the lifeline of these movies, and we're talking Jurassic Park this week, when they put this thing together, did they have any idea the lifeline that this would put together? And how do you look at the Jurassic Park, certainly the conglomerate of this movie and beyond?
Ray, it's hard to say what there's always going to be some people that say, oh, I knew it was going to be a big hit, and other people that think, oh, man, this could be a disaster. So, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Obviously, Michael Crichton had a big following as an author. He had success in previous movies and stuff. And the book itself was a big hit. So there is a little bit of safety net in thinking that it could be a big film. But the special effects were so innovative at the time that they could have been a disaster if it hadn't worked out. In fact, Phil Tippett, who was one of the great stop motion animators. He was going to do stop motion work for the film, much like they had done even all the way back to King Kong, which is a big influence for Steven Spielberg. But when they saw the footage of the computer-generated dinosaurs, Phil Tippett looked over at Spielberg and says, "I think we're extinct." And they actually put that line in the movie.
That's great. All right, there we go. We've gone to film school this week. Joe Fortunato, film study professor, joins us Fridays. This week we look at Jurassic Park. Joe, as always, my friend, thanks for jumping on forward. We look forward to another visit coming up next Friday. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Ray.
Joe Fortunato takes us to film school each Friday at this time on 93.5, 1590 WAKR.